Inflation is really what's ruined this country. When we, at the end of World War II, we were at the peak. We'd won a war. We were a leading country. We had all the gold. We were on the gold standard. It was truth, justice, the American way, and we really believed it. And we weren't perfect. Don't get me wrong. We did a lot of bad things, but boy, we were a lot better than we are today. And what happened is, we let some of that go to our head and started making mistakes. The biggest of which I think, Vietnam was an enormous mistake, which then led to big deficits, which then led to a gold drain, which then led to abandoning the gold standard. And the gold standard wasn't perfect. And as all Bitcoiners know, it's centralized and, hard to verify and hard to transact in. But having said that, the problem got measurably worse when we abandoned the gold standard in 1971. And that started the trend towards financialization. And, we've now kind of hit peak financialization. I mean, when you have 0% interest rates for 7 years in a row, and when you have quantitative easing, which is massive money printing, when your money supply grows 42% in 2 years, like it did in COVID, your financial system is broken, and the notion that we can just kind of put a Band-Aid on and fix it, that's just not right. I mean, it's like, we've got a drinking problem, and we got to go cold turkey. And that means we got to stop creating debt. We've got to return to sound money. And let's go back to pre-2008. The 80s and 90s, all these things were bubbling and happening, but in general, the world was a pretty good place. The economy was doing pretty well. I kind of marked the beginning of the end as kind of 9/11. Well, the dot-com bubble, and then the bursting of that in 9/11, which sent us on a spree to spend $8 trillion in the Middle East on stupid stuff. So that, I think, is where the lies really intensified. There were lies in the Nixon administration, obviously, but it got progressively worse. And it just, with every step, people have been hurting. Obamacare was supposed to make our healthcare system better. It's made it worse and more expensive. There's just absolutely nothing the government touches works, because the people who are in there are corrupt, and they're doing things in their own best interests or in the interests of the big corporations that they're in hock to. And so, the rest of us suffer as a result of that. And so, and like I say, if you weren't hurting too badly and you were, raising your family and, focusing on putting money on the or putting food on the table and watching the football game, people weren't paying attention. But I think one of the things that's happened, it's pushed in our favor, Nico, is that the problems have gotten worse. And people, when people start to hurt, they start to say, well, okay, damn it, what am I going to do about this? Let's solve this. If I said I was going to give you 10 gallons of beer and I gave you 9 gallons of beer, and you gave me some money for that, you would say, hey, you cheated me. You promised me 10 and gave me 9. And so, money is a representation of time, work, value, energy, whatever you want to call it, but it's what we all use to make our economy work. And when it's continually being diluted by a system that requires it to be diluted, that's built in to be credit-based system, then that's effectively the government stealing money from everybody who works, and it's stealing your time and stealing your labor. And it leads to all kinds of perverse incentives. The Keynesian model, which empowers governments, has really been dominant. And it also empowers economists and makes them very rich. Empowers. There's a lot of data in there. Most people listening will know this, but it's bothersome to me that Janet Yellen got paid $7 million in speaking fees from the financial industry, right? Including 800,000 plus from Citadel. Well, I got to tell you, there's no free market that would suggest to me that Janet Yellen's wisdom for a 1 or a 2 hour speech is worth a couple $100,000. That's to me just a covert bribe, where a big bank is paying her to come speak, knowing that she's in a position of power to regulate them, or will be in the future, or is influencing policy, and they want her to influence policy in a way that will benefit them at the expense of everybody else. That's exactly the way the system works.
Who is this group of people? Who is this group of people that's going to rise up and say enough is enough?
Well, I think it's your generation, and I think it's anybody who has been mistreated by the system. And that's where, hopefully, and that's why we've got to open up their eyes to it and offer them hope and, offer them the positivity. I mean, you said something earlier that really resonated with me, which is, when you're in Bitcoin, it's like you have this orange force field around you. I mean, I can't tell you how peaceful and happy I've been since I've gotten fully into Bitcoin, because, I was kind of fighting this battle on this. I've been fighting the battle on sound money for quite some time, and I was fighting it with a golden shield, which didn't really work, and because they figured out how to manipulate gold and centralize all the things we know are wrong with it. And suddenly, all along, here comes Safe, and he writes his book, and then I got a bunch of guys like you quoting von Mises, and it's like, holy crap, we got an army now that's gonna come out here and fight to make this world a better place. And look, you guys have the most at stake. I mean, I'm at the other end of the generational spectrum where I can see the end point. You got a whole life in front of you, so you want to get it right, and you want the world to be a good place. And the thing is, good ideas spread naturally. I mean, people, a lot of people do the wrong things, and there are a lot of things that are bad, and there are a lot of times that are bad. But if you study history carefully, you read it carefully. I mean, there's been the history. The human race marches forward. We really do. We get more. I think we get more ethical. I think we get more intelligent. I think we've got more technology. We get more tools. We get more efficient. There are people who believe in the state, believe in the federal government, believe in fiat money, and benefit from that system, and that's fine. They're entitled to do that. But the outcomes that they're producing aren't very good, are they? For most people, and
no.
Yeah, in fact, they're quite bad. If you dig down a little bit below the level of those of us who are doing okay, my sister lives in a rural community in Utah. She tells me some stories that are just heartbreaking in terms of how hard it is for the average person. So, that to me means that it's incumbent upon those of us who are aware to try and push for a better world, a better system, fairer system, and then to help those that we know and care about, in terms of telling the story of Bitcoin and telling why, helping them to protect themselves. I mean, I have stories of investors that I've orange pilled who, are now very thankful that, they bought it at 10,000 when I was pounding the table. You know what I mean? And that's satisfying. And by the way, that's not over yet. I mean, it's, when it's $1 million, people are going to say, holy crap, you were buying it at 100,000? Oh my God, you have a whole coin? Oh my God, nobody I know has a whole coin. So right. I mean, it's all, I really do believe Saylor's right. It is going up forever, Laura. So
absolutely.
So, well, you just kind of got to get in there. I mean, I was counseling one of my investors the other day. It's like, well, I put an X amount in, it's a big number. He said, maybe I'd hold the rest back until it goes down. I said, I wouldn't do that. I would just buy it, because you may not go back down. And if unless you need it in the next 6 months or year, or even, or 2 years, really, it'll be higher in 10 years. So just buy it,
Yeah.
That's kind of how I see it. Almost nobody that's not aware of its existence. I mean, here's a perfect example. This morning I was reading the Wall Street Journal. Nick Timieros was speaking about Fed policy, and he talked about how, whether it was tight or loose was in part determined by things like this, the screaming price of Bitcoin. I don't think those were his words, but, and for Bitcoin to be mentioned in an article about Fed policy, I mean, that's kind of an Overton window shift, right? So everyone's becoming aware of this thing. And so, yeah, I mean, the Gladwell model says as long as it takes you to go from 0 to 15 or 10%, it'll take the same amount of time to go from 10 to 90. And so we're 16 years in, and these adoption curves, they do get steep. And I've seen the same curve for mobile phones, computers, PC. I mean, almost every development. I mean, washing machines, automobiles, any new invention, and it tends to get started and people start using it, the early adopters. But then when it becomes pretty obvious that, oh, this is a good thing and we want this, and I think that's what's happening now. I mean, most people now, well, there's nobody in Bitcoin now that's bought it in the last 15 years. It's not in a profit condition, so it's working. Even if you bought at the peak, pre SBF, you paid 60 or 70, and we were as recently as 107. So it's starting to work, and that's just going to attract more people. So, and I think the word is spreading, and people are coming to understand what it is. The FUD around energy and the FUD around Sam Bankman-Fried, those are getting explained away.